What if everything you believe about people who enjoy being alone after 65 is missing something important? Because at first glance, it looks simple. They avoid crowds. They don't call as much. They seem more comfortable in silence than conversation. And most people assume that means something is wrong. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if some of the most mentally strong, emotionally stable, and self-aware individuals in later life are the ones who choose solitude on purpose? And what if the real mystery is not why they are alone, but what that solitude reveals about them? Stay with me, because one of these 12 traits will completely challenge what you think about aging, relationships, and emotional health after 70. To understand this, we have to go back to the beginning of life, long before retirement, long before loneliness becomes a concern. The story starts in early adulthood. When people are young, society teaches one dominant belief: being social equals being healthy. You go to gatherings. You build networks. You stay busy. You stay connected. And for many decades, that idea shaped how researchers measured well-being. But in the late 20th century, psychologists like Carl Jung began exploring a different idea: that solitude is not always isolation. Sometimes it is development. Not withdrawal, but self-clarity. As life moves forward, personality begins to take shape in quiet ways, and the first trait appears early. People who enjoy being alone often have a high level of internal reflection. They don't need constant external validation to feel stable. But this doesn't become obvious until later in life, because in the 40s, something changes. Responsibilities increase. Careers peak. Family demands grow. Stress rises significantly. According to multiple American health surveys tracking midlife emotional strain, during this period, people often lose time for themselves without realizing it. And here is where the second trait begins forming. They develop emotional independence. Not emotional detachment. Independence. They learn how to regulate feelings without relying heavily on others. At first, this looks like distance, but in reality, it is resilience. Now let's move forward. After age 70, something very important happens. Researchers studying aging, including work influenced by the long-running Harvard study of adult development, discovered that emotional quality matters more than social quantity. In other words, fewer relationships, but deeper ones become more important for well-being. But here is the twist most people miss. Some individuals don't just reduce social circles, they naturally prefer solitude. And that leads us to trait 3. They protect their energy carefully. Every conversation, every interaction, every social demand is evaluated subconsciously. Is this worth my time? Is this emotionally draining? Does this add value or remove it? This is not avoidance. It is energy management. Now we move deeper into the pattern. Trait 4 is heightened observation. People who enjoy solitude often notice things others miss: tone changes, behavior shifts, inconsistencies in words and actions. They become quiet analysts of human behavior. Which brings us to trait 5. They are highly self-sufficient, not because they reject help, but because they have learned through experience that depending too heavily on others can create disappointment. Now pause here, because this is where misunderstanding begins. Many assume self-sufficiency means loneliness, but research suggests otherwise. In fact, emotional independence is strongly associated with better mental health outcomes in older adults when combined with meaningful social connection. Which brings us to trait 6. They choose relationships selectively. Not fewer relationships out of fear, but fewer relationships out of precision. Quality replaces quantity. As life experience grows, tolerance for superficial interaction decreases. Now let's move into the shift after 70 that most people ignore. As retirement changes routines, many individuals experience shrinking social networks. According to American aging data, social isolation becomes more common with age, but not everyone experiences it the same way. Some feel lonely, others feel relieved, and that difference reveals trait 7. Comfort with silence. Silence is no longer uncomfortable. It becomes restorative. This is where personality and perception diverge. To some, silence feels empty. To others, it feels full. Now the breaking point. Trait 8 appears under stress. They do not panic when alone during difficult times. Instead, they process internally first. They reflect, they analyze, they stabilize. Then they act. This emotional sequencing is one of the strongest predictors of long-term resilience in aging populations. Now, trait 9. They avoid unnecessary drama, not because they are detached from others, but because they recognize emotional chaos as draining rather than engaging. Trait 10 is independence in decision-making. They do not rely heavily on group consensus. They trust internal judgment developed over decades of experience. Trait 11 is deep appreciation for meaningful connection. This is the paradox. People who enjoy being alone often value connection more intensely, but only when it is genuine. And now the final trait. Trait 12 is something researchers often overlook. They are not afraid of being alone with themselves. And this is the core difference, because solitude reveals something powerful. For some people, being alone exposes anxiety. For others, it reveals clarity. Now let's connect this to the real-world fallout. As people age, misunderstanding solitude can lead to misjudgment. Some individuals are labeled as isolated when they are actually emotionally balanced. Others are pressured into social environments that drain rather than heal them. Research consistently shows that emotional stress can influence physical health, sleep quality, and overall well-being in older adults. So the impact is not just psychological. It is biological. Naturally, people try to fix what they assume is a problem. They push more social interaction. They encourage constant engagement. They assume solitude must be corrected, but old advice often misses the nuance, because forced connection is not the same as meaningful connection, and that difference matters deeply in later life. So, what should you do today? First, recognize that solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. One drains energy, the other restores it. Second, pay attention to the quality of relationship rather than the quantity. A few meaningful connections can be more powerful than many shallow ones. Third, allow space for silence without fear. Reflection is not emptiness, it is processing. And here is the warning. Research in aging psychology consistently suggests that forced social activity can increase stress in individuals who naturally prefer solitude. Ignoring personality differences can negatively affect well-being. Now consider this question. What if society has misunderstood solitude for decades? What if some of the most emotionally balanced people are the ones who choose less noise, not more? Connection, that possibility challenges almost everything we assume about aging, happiness, and mental health. And in the next video, we will explore why certain personality traits become stronger, not weaker with age, and how that changes everything you thought you knew about emotional strength after 60. If this message gave you a new perspective, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Every like helps more people understand the difference between loneliness and solitude. Every share helps someone feel seen instead of misunderstood. And if you want more deep, evidence-based life lessons about aging, psychology, and emotional wisdom, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss what comes next.